Greetings, loves. Welcome back. I am Tactical Girlfriend. Glad to have you here. So today I'm rounding out my safety series with a discussion about lead exposure. Lead exposure is a big concern in a modern industrial society in general, and especially when it comes to firing guns, that is a very large concern. So without further ado, I do want to get into talking about how we can identify the certain factors that add up to lead exposure, as well as ways to mitigate them safely. So where does lead come from? Lead is usually found in both bullets as well as in primers. With primers, when it is struck, it usually expels some sort of lead vapor. With the bullet itself, there is oftentimes a lead core, which is exposed at the base. Sometimes if it is a jacketed hollow point, it is exposed at the tip too, but that nonetheless does seem to leak some sort of lead material as it leaves the barrel in both some sort of vaporized gas as well as in particulate matter. One thing to note, there are lead-free primers and bullets on the market. They're just simply less common than their leaden counterparts. However, it would be great to see one day where we just get rid of lead entirely. Please, 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 please. But regardless, for now, lead is usually some sort of factor that you want to think of when you are firing a gun. When it is vaporized and particulated, it usually will find itself all over your gun. It will find itself on the end of the muzzle especially. It will find itself on whatever targets you're hitting. It will settle on the ground and it will get blown back at you, especially if you're firing a DI platform like the AR. So there are many factors that also enhance lead exposure when shooting. That can be wind, when the rounds are being fired and expelling the vapor and particulate. If you do have a headwind, that will actually contribute to additional lead going your direction. This also might be enhanced by shooting indoors, where there might be a larger accumulation of lead on surfaces, as well as a lack of ventilation that traps the lead in that room. This can also be steel targets. Steel targets, when hit, are obviously hit with the round, and that lead spall and spatter collects on the surface. So therefore, you want to make sure that if you are ferrying around steel targets, please make sure they're not touching anything that you are actively normally touching, and that you are handling it in a contained manner. That means wearing gloves, putting it in some sort of container or bag. Make sure that it's not touching anything else you care about. And then lastly, reloading. This includes when you're actually reloading ammo, when you're manufacturing ammo, as well as if you are collecting brass for reloading. That brass also has lead particulate left over on it once it's ejected after being shot. Please don't collect this in something like a hat that you wear, and then you got your lead hair, and then you touch your lead hair, and then you eat, and then it's just not good. So please don't do that. So why do we care about lead exposure? We want to mitigate lead exposure so that we avoid lead poisoning. Lead poisoning is an overaccumulation of lead in concentrations in the blood. So what we want to do is mitigate that as best as we can so that we don't reach critical levels where it starts to adversely affect our health. So as far as what lead poisoning might look like, it can affect every single organ in your body, and it is different for every individual, and there is absolutely no very clear symptom, as they all are very unique and different. That being said, lead poisoning can manifest in various forms such as difficulty concentrating, headaches, abdominal pain, kidney problems, nerve disorders, and general mood disorders as well. While you can't necessarily just pinpoint it by symptoms, the best way to do this is by testing. Another thing to keep in mind is that children absorb lead at far higher rates than adults do. This can lead to developmental issues as well as further medical complications. Also, pregnant people can experience premature births and miscarriages, so please factor all of this in as you prepare for lead mitigation. There are some pretty typical lead levels found in blood, such as 10 micrograms per deciliter in adults and 5 or below in children. By comparison though, pre-industrial civilizations were found to average around 0.016 micrograms per deciliter. There is no good lead levels in blood, and we do want to make sure that we are mitigating that as much as possible, as depending on the individual, they will affect you entirely different from one another. For this reason, it's very important to mitigate your lead exposure, and if you are feeling that you are regularly exposed to lead at high concentrations, that you are tested regularly. And so when it comes to mitigating lead exposure, there are some very simple but proactive measures that you should be taking when firing a gun. The first thing that I would like to recommend is wearing shooting gloves. The very first point of contact that creates lead exposure are usually going to be your hands. If you can help prevent your hands from getting dirty in the first place, all the better. The largest vector for lead exposure is going to be through your face, from ingesting and breathing lead particulates and vapor. So for that reason, you may want to consider wearing a respirator when you shoot. Another thing to keep in mind is your ammunition type. Shooting fully jacketed ammunition greatly reduces the amount of exposure from the round itself. Aside from the gear, there are some very good habits to practice when shooting and handling firearms. The largest thing, like I said before, is your face. You want to make sure that you're not getting stuff on your face, you're not absorbing it through your skin, you're not breathing it, you're not eating it, you're not putting it on your hair for it to get on something else later. So therefore, you want to make sure that you're not eating or drinking at the range with your bare hands. You want to make sure that if you are using some sort of wrapper as a barrier to whatever you are consuming, and that you are not touching any surfaces that come in contact with your mouth. And yes, I have a friend who really likes doing this for some reason, and she knows it gets on my nerves. I'm calling you out, bitch. Cut it out. So how do you get the lead off? Well, you can get lead off. This is a wipe that helps bond to lead particulates and helps remove whatever lead particulates are on that surface that it comes in contact with. There's also de-lead wipes. There's also de-leading soap that you can wash your hands with. This is great for wiping off your face after shooting, wiping off your hands, your arms. It's also great to wipe off the surface of your guns so that when you're handling your guns and training at home doing dry fire practice, you have a little bit less exposure there too. And so when I get home from a day at the range, I like to keep everything very well contained and not in contact with the rest of the stuff that I interact with on a daily basis. That means taking my shoes off at the outside of the door, not tracking it inside and getting stuff everywhere. I put those shoes in a plastic bag. I then store that away, and that way they're all nicely contained. I also like to then take my clothes off, yeah, and then I like to go take a shower and make sure that I just scrub my hair and every inch of my body, making sure that I am thoroughly clean from that. If I do drop off my gear in, say, the entryway of my home, I do want to make sure that after I put that stuff away, I do clean off those surfaces so that no one else touches that and then spreads lead all over the place. You want to make sure that you're treating this stuff like anthrax, basically. You want everything that comes in contact with any leaden surface to be thoroughly cleaned and that you are mitigating that exposure as much as possible. I really want to stress that kids and pets are very susceptible to lead exposure. And so that being said, you want to make sure that they're not coming up to you when you get home and giving you a big old hug. You want to make sure that they're staying away from you until you're thoroughly decontaminated. If it helps, I would probably bring a change of clothing to the range to change into, so that when you come home, you are a little bit cleaner at least. Also, with pets, keep in mind that they do lick their paws. So again, if you're getting anything on the surface of your floor, be sure it's cleaned afterwards, shortly afterwards, please. I know I say this a lot, but owning firearms is a huge responsibility. You need to take ownership of every effect that ensues and follows your usage of a firearm. That means not only owning where that bullet lands, but also all the effects that come after. That includes long-term effects like lead exposure. So please make sure that you are mitigating that and that you are not only keeping yourself safe, but everyone that you care about and love. Please be safe with that. And so I want to thank you all once again for tuning in. I am Tactical Girlfriend. Be safe out there. Take care. Bye.